So we've been at this point in the recap, we've been at this for like 6-7 days. We're smoked. Like we're just mentally tired. We're physically wore out. And so the day after the death march, you want to know, so you want to know what's the worst thing to have your hunting partner say to you, or the worst reaction? So when Tyler and I are hiking out on the death march, we hike and hike and hike and hike and hike, and it's dark. And I'm like trying to remember, like, okay, when did we cross this in our way up? And I'm like, kind of, I'm dislocated. I'm like, I don't know where the hell I am. And at one point, I'm like confident enough to say to Tyler, I'm like, man, we got to be getting pretty close to the cabin by now. And like the laughter that you responded with, and like, it was terrible. Like your response was like, oh my God, this guy's an idiot. Like we're so far away yet, which is deflating, but we did make it back.
You survived.
I survived. So the next morning alarm goes off at 5:30. I remember standing up. I'm like just standing up beside my bed, like just rocking around. Like I had 17 Busch lattes before I went to bed, which I did not. I don't drink anymore, but it felt like that, where I was like, oh, what's going on with my life? Like, why am I making these decisions? And you're like, dude, we got nothing going on. Let's just sleep in. Let's go find somewhere else. And I'm like, okay, like if the guide says that, I'm like, I'll sleep in, whatever. So we go back to sleep, and I'm having a hard time going back to sleep. It gets light out, light shining in my window. I look out the window just for the hell of it, and there's 4 mule deer, 2 mule deer does and fawns standing out there. So I photograph them, get up, go have a cup of coffee with Pat, the guy who owns the place. Tyler rolls out of bed. We eat a good breakfast, and we're just kind of like, we're at that point where it's like, what do we do with the day? Because the options were probably to go big somewhere else. Like figure out another kind of death march thing to do.
A lower elevation death march, at least.
For sure. Though that's the other thing too. So we'll get to this day in a second, because this day gets real weird in a hurry. But I live at 800 feet, and our first spot, the elevation, we got out there. That was the best I've ever felt coming into the mountains. I barely had a headache, barely felt lightheaded, felt good. Like, really felt strong, felt like no problem. And then we moved to this other spot that's higher, and probably part of it was just being worn down from a week, but part of it was just high enough where I was like, oh, here's the elevation. Like that, when we were, if I'd reached down to retie my boot or something, and I'd pick my head back up, I'd get lightheaded in this spot. It was just enough of a change, and we were high enough where I was like, oh, this is so much worse. And I don't know, it couldn't have been more than like 1,000 or 2,000 feet, probably, could it?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It was about 2,000 feet, 1,800.
Yeah. So it was. Here's my advice. Again, we do this on every elk podcast. So leading up to this hunt, I ran 800 miles, just shy of 800 miles this year. Spent 3 days a week at the gym pretty regularly. And still when I get to 9,500, 10,000 feet, I'm like, man, there's no oxygen here for me. My body just doesn't respond well to it. And so I honestly think anybody listening in the Midwest, the East, who doesn't live out there, you're supposed to get in shape, like get in better shape than you think. like work your butt off, because you will have so much of a better hunt. And I know everybody preaches that, but it's like a year-round thing. It doesn't start in June, a couple months before elk season. It starts January, or it starts now. So I'll get off my soapbox there. But my point is that high elevation kicked my ass.
You did a great job. I thought you did great. I mean, I could tell by the end of the trip, it was wearing on you a little bit, and that's elevation. I mean, like I said, I grew up here. I grew up in Colorado, and I live at high elevation. And so, it's a little different ball game for me just because I'm there. But you did a great job. I know what you were doing all season. We've been talking about doing an elk hunt for a couple of years.
Yep.
And I know you've really been getting after it, physically training. And, some people's lifestyles and timing and schedules don't allow for as much training as they'd like, but anything you can do. I mean, and especially diet related, and maybe that's a topic for another time, but, getting as fit as you can to be here, you're just going to have a better hunt. You're going to feel better. You're going to be more successful. And sometimes it's just pushing it for that last day.
Yep.
Or, like we saw. I mean, if we wouldn't have just kept getting after it, you just don't win. I mean, that's how it works.
Yep. I know people are sick of hearing that, but it matters so much to not only to your success, but just the enjoyment of the trip. Like you're going to have to work hard. If you're in the right space to do it, it's so much better. So anyway, last day of the hunt, we sleep in, we are making a plan. We could have hunted basically last full day of the hunt. Let me put it that way. We had a little play in on Friday, and for me it was 16 hours to get home. So we knew last deadline for sure, and so we get up, we eat breakfast. We don't really have a plan. We're kind of dragging around. The guy who owns the place, we start talking to him, and they have a trout pond there. And he's like, why don't you guys take some fly rods, go see what those trout are eating? And we're like, yes, we will do that. And we grab some fly rods, rig up some stuff. And I'm like crazy. I'm like super self-conscious to cast a fly rod in front of you, because I grew up doing it, but I got out of it, and I've been out of it a long time. And Tyler's like a retired guide and a fly fishing master, and so I'm like, he's gonna think I'm a freaking idiot. Like he's already given me advice on super elementary elk hunting like tips and tactics that we're gonna get into. But anyway, this dude's got rainbows, cut bows, and these palomino trout, which are like incredibly beautiful. There's some kind of variation of a rainbow trout, but they're like yellowish orange, and they look like they belong in the Amazon. They look like they should be swimming next to peacock bass, not swimming at 9,500 feet. Tyler and I go down there. I'm running the camera. Tyler's casting. First 3 casts, catches trout. And then I'm like, okay, we're into this. Like, this is going to happen for a while. And so we start catching these trout, which are we called it high fence trout fishing, because it was like, they were not on their A game. These were not public land elk. So we're catching some trout, and what happens?
So, and by the way, the fishing is fire. We are slaying these fish right now.
So let me stop you for a second. Up until that point, I'd elk hunted 3 times in my life. So I'm at about probably 18 to 20 days of my life elk hunting. And I'm like, this is the most fun I've ever had elk hunting, which was trout fishing. So anyway, we're trout fishing. We're
gonna continue this story. Thanks for staying on if you've been listening, because this is the best part of the story. And also, you're going to hate us for this, so we'll just preempt it with that. So we're sitting here catching these exotic trout species like it's going out of style in a beautiful setting. And it's probably 12:30, somewhere in there, right about lunchtime. And we hear a bugle. We're pretty darn close to the timber. I mean, we're probably, 150 yards from timber.
Yeah, well, 150 yards from from public land.
Yeah, from public land, and just out the back of the fence line here, and we hear a bugle, and I kind of scratched my head, and I was like, I don't know if that was a hunter. It's pretty darn close to private land, and whatever. We're making a lot of noise. There's a guy building a bridge with a skid loader, like right behind us, diesel skid loader, and we're like, I don't know. So we cast a few more, catch a few more fish, and we hear another bugle. And I look at Tony, and I'm like, at some point, we're going to have to pay attention to this, because this might actually be an elk. And so we hear a third bugle go off, and I was a little bit further towards. I was kind of creeping my way down the pond so I could hear better, and I heard it go off, and I heard the end of the bugle and the tones, and I said, "That's an elk." So we need to get our proverbial shit in order here. And so we put our camo on and eat a pretty nice lunch still, which I'm kind of embarrassed to say, but we did take time to eat a nice lunch. And we proceeded to hunt, and I'll let you tell that part of the story.
So yeah, I'm not going to apologize for eating a good lunch after eating Mountain House and trail mix for 5-6 days. I'm not apologizing for that. I'm too old to be pissed at being comfortable once in a while. So we load up our stuff. It's like 2:00. And now we're like, all right, we'll go out rest of the day. And to be fair, I want to add this in. So I had been looking at that stuff right behind the cabin on that public chunk. And the guy who owns the cabin, I asked him, I'm like, does anybody ever hunt there? And he's like, yeah, elk move in there all the time. And he starts telling me where the access points are. And it was just one of those spots where to access it from the public down the road, on either side of us, I should say, it's real easy to walk around that area because you're heading high. And so it started to feel like, man, this is kind of making sense. But even when we set out, we weren't like 100% sure there wasn't somebody up there bugling. It was like, this feels like an elk, but it was like, it still didn't feel like, okay, we know 100%. We get out of the cabin, cross the fence, start hiking down there, and you pick a spot to go up this aspen stand, and we're working our way up there, and we just hit a zone that was, not very far up there, a couple 100 yards. Yeah. And you just pointed, and there's this pounded elk trail. And there's good grass, there's beds, big elk beds, there's deer beds. It was the first place I saw with a concentration of deer sign too. And we'd covered a lot of ground. And you could just tell, like, it wasn't like the spots before where it's like, oh, they were here. Maybe there's still a few stragglers. It's like they are here. And so I can't remember if you called or bugled first there.
Yeah, no, I did just a real... To revisit our conversation earlier about kind of the So one, I thought we had proximity because we knew that there was an elk bugling in there, suspected it was a real elk, not a hunter bugling. You're going to just go, you just run with that because it doesn't help you if it's a hunter anyway. You might as well just call to them. And so I knew that we were close or close-ish, and I also didn't want to advertise to them as though other hunters would just blow them out with a big, huge herd bull bugle or huge locator. And so just ran like a really close, tight, like, hi, here we are, short bugle that didn't go very far. I mean, you probably couldn't have heard it from over 100 yards away.
Yep.
And we got a response right away. And so we started working that bull.
Yeah, so we get this response, and we just happen to be kind of on this knob with this aspen stand shoot in front of us. So we're like right buried into the edge of dark timber, a little vein of dark timber, and there's this beautiful, perfect-looking aspen stand in front of us that's kind of like a little ravine running down there. I mean, it's just like a natural looking funnel anyway. And so Tyler gets behind me. I knock up, range the pine tree. If they come in there, they're within 35 yards. And so I dial down to 33 yards because it looks like there's a trail down there. Tyler starts calling, and like we're kind of paying attention to the wind, and the wind sucks. And so I kind of look back at you and make a couple hand gestures, like maybe move down, and you drop down to the edge of the aspen stand below me, maybe 40, 50 yards away. And then that way, if they circle, you've got a shot, I've got a shot, whatever. It was a better setup. It was a good move. And when you did that, what blew my mind was the change. It sounded like you went so much farther away. When you started calling, just from being behind me, 15 yards to dropping down over the lip of that thing, it sounded like you were going away hard. And you got down there and called, and it was like hellfire coming down the mountain. As soon as you did that, I could hear just like rocks rolling and branches breaking. And I was like, holy balls, there's one coming in hot. And I look up the mountain, and here comes this bull elk running. He's not like approaching cautiously. He's like, holy crap, there's ladies down there. Here's my chance. And he hits right before my shooting lane, and I draw, and he starts walking down through there. And this is going to sound like I'm being facetious or I'm making this up. I'm not lying. I think my pin was floating from like the roots of the pine trees to the tops of the pine trees to the clouds. It was one of the only times in my life I've ever been aware of how poorly I was aiming. And I was like, I remember telling myself, like, you've got to get this together because that bull's going to be through that opening in, 5, 6, 7 feet. You're going to lose this opportunity. And I'm ashamed to admit this, but I'm going to say this anyway. I don't remember getting the pin on him to shoot. Like there's like a blank space in there. I have like bull amnesia or something. That little part of my life disappeared from my consciousness. And so, but I shoot, and my first reaction, because it chunked into him, was I hit him in the shoulder. And I'm telling you, I was terrified to screw this up, which is a bad place to be when you have to make a quick shot. Like, you don't want to be thinking, you want to be thinking, oh, I got this, not, oh, I'm going to screw this up and Tyler's going to think I'm an idiot. And so that arrow hits and the bull doesn't react a whole lot. He just keeps going in your direction. So I knock another arrow, and because he looks like he's going to cut down about 45 yards, and I see the spot behind his shoulder, and I'm going, man, that looks perfect. And so then just as I'm about to like range and draw again, he gurgles and takes off and runs towards you and tries to jump a brush pile. This big deadfall, gets tangled up in it and tips over 20 yards in front of you, 60 yards downhill from me. And it's like, holy crap.
Yep. He went down. I didn't see the shot. So I dropped down over a little knob in elevation. I couldn't see Tony anymore when I started calling. And so, I made a few calls that I thought would be the proper calls for the situation. And I hear Tony said it right. I mean, it sounded like this bull was running. I mean, he wasn't just interested. I mean, he was on a dead run. Right to us. And so I could hear him coming from a long ways away. I couldn't see anything, which was killing me. And so I keep hearing it, and then I heard it slow down a little bit, and I'm like, oh, he's getting closer. I could tell. And I just kept hearing, I was just, please let me hear a bow go off. Please let me hear a bow go off. And so I hear Tony's string hit, and I hear that just that telltale suction cup wet bag sound, and I was like, oh man, he put a good shot on him. You could just tell, the sound if you bow hunt long enough. After the shot, I cow called a few times to try to slow him down, and it seemed to me that he didn't even care that he was shot.
He didn't.
He kept coming right to us, or right to me and below you, and when I saw him come over, I heard him breathing, and I knew that you'd hit him in the lungs, and I watched him pile up right in front of me. And boy, you couldn't have walked up to a diagram and said, this is where you put an arrow if you're going to shoot him in the right spot. I mean, it was just right behind the shoulder, midship, right in the crease, double lung, perfect.
It was like divine intervention. It was so unbelievable. It was crazy. And what was crazy about it, not in addition to how it all played out, you're right. That bull's reaction to that shot, I shot him right through the ribs, right through his lungs, and all he was doing was looking for you until he started gurgling and the light started to go out, because he was only on his feet for maybe like 10 to 15 seconds before it was done. But even then, like getting shot, he didn't even react to it hardly. He was just like, I know there's a cow down here. And he got down there and he just peeled right in your direction. That's why he ran and died right in front of you, is because he was still looking for that cow, it's crazy to see.
It really is. It is. And I think that if you watch a lot of elk video and footage of shot, post shot, especially rut bulls, you'll always see somebody cow call afterwards. And sometimes that's to get a second arrow in them, right? So that they stop and they turn and you get a second shot. But I did it just to calm him down so he wouldn't run very far. And shoot, he just kept coming right in. I mean, he until he tipped over, he was looking for love.
Yeah. Well, he was love struck, and he was running down the gauntlet. He wasn't going to make it out of there without getting an arrow in him, because he was well within your range when he piled up. So even if he had made it past me, it would have been a rough go for that dude. He was, I think he was destined to go to the processor. So before this, Tyler had told me several times, like, listen, if you shoot one, don't yell, don't do anything, stay quiet. Yeah. Don't party. Because we might double up. And what happened there, Tyler, after I shot that bull?
Yeah. So, it's the last day. We've been getting our ass kicked, and I partied. And yeah. I'm excited. I'm excited for Tony. We've been hunting together for a long time. We've been friends. We've been over, let's call it a 4 or 5 year period of time. We've become really good friends, and we've talked about elk hunting a lot. And Tony never shot an elk, and for me, it was really important for me to try to help you get your first elk, and to be there and to be a part of it. And people talk about cheesy shit about, being with your friends, and it's all about that, but you can tell the guys who really care about just hunting elk. or trying to get an elk. And for me, it was really just, it was us. We spent a lot of time together in the backcountry and in different places and states and hunting different critters. And, it was just cool, and I just couldn't help it. And like, I didn't give a shit if I was going to kill an elk at that point, because I was just so excited for you. And so I partied, and
I partied,
and then Tony was like, "Okay, if you're going to do it, I can." Do it.
So what we party, but then what happens?
So yeah, then subsequently, I'm just like, "Oh, I think there's another bull. I shouldn't have done that." So we're going down to look at Tony's bull, and right before we walk up on him, we hear a bugle behind us, and it was a good one. And so I'm like, "Oh, the herd bull's still up here." And party or not, if he heard us or not, he didn't care, because he let another one rip right then. And so I said, "Okay, well, let's, we've got cloud cover. It's cool this afternoon." It was actually the first day in, I think, a 7-day hunt that we had cloud cover, good cloud cover.
Yep.
And so, I was like, this bull's going to be fine. Let's spend 20, 30 minutes. Let's see if we can work on this herd bull. And so, we went, we closed the gap to that bugle, I don't know, 100 yards or something like that, 125 yards maybe.
Yep.
I just didn't feel comfortable getting any closer. The wind was pretty much calm, and the ground cover, like I said, no rain for a while, was really, really loud. And so we wanted to be careful. And so we get in there and we get tight on where this bugle sounded like it came from, and try to find a decent shooting lane, a natural funnel where we think this elk is going to come through, kind of down the fall line, if you want to call it that. He had to come downhill a little bit to us, not steep, but anyway, that doesn't matter. So we get in there, and I cow call a little bit. He responds, and I called back with an assembly bugle. Some people call it the harem call, or a bull calling cows bugle, whatever you want to call it. A very short, raspy tone with a lip ball in the middle. And if you can Google that if you're listening to this and you want to work on your elk calling, that's what it is. But anyway, once we did that, we were in the red zone.